Y por qué? Big time por qué.
Esos raros tienen ojos allá arriba.
These weirdos have eyes up above.
Pueden leer labios desde el espacio.
They can read lips from space.
So, let's go inside. The drones can't spy on us there.
Así que entra. Los drones no nos pueden espiar desde allí.
Claro que pueden. Con micrófonos espía.
Of course they can. With microphones. Spy microphones.
You think they planted a bug in my house?
¿Piensas que plantaron un bicho en mi casa?
¿Un insecto?
An
¿Cómo así un
insect.
insecto?
With an insect.
No, not an insect, a bug.
No, insecto.
Wait,
Espera.
stop. Not you.
Parada. Tú no.
Hey, my name is Alex, and if you're new to the channel, I answer one question about films and TV series. Is it worth the cinema ticket price, or is it worth your time? The final episodes of promising series tend to spend most of the time of the last episode launching the next season. And by launching, I mean setting up a cliffhanger that will keep people hooked enough to return for the next season. And even though the next season for Pluribus won't come out until 2027, which is about a year and a half from recording this video, the fact that Apple commissioned two seasons at the same time just gives Vince Gilligan a bit more freedom with writing the finale. And this is a worthy ending to what has been one of the best series, if not the best series of the year. So let's talk about episode 9. We have the chess pieces set very nice from episode 8 to see an interesting and long delayed, to be honest, meetup between Carol and Manussos. But this episode, as the last one in the series, needs to launch season 2, and to achieve that, it needs to do two things smartly. They're tricky things, but they need to be achieved. It needs to advance the story in a new and exciting way, and at the same time, provide some tension and drama worthy of the end of the season. And in that sense, Pluribus does both fairly well. The story is certainly pushed forward. We see the clock right at the beginning of the episode that shows 71 days since the joining event, and we find Kusimano, which is the Indian girl that's non-infected. We've met her in earlier episodes, she's now living obviously in her village in the mountains and with the joint surrounding her and recreating her old way of life. A plane lands in the area, delivers a case with a sort of a steaming substance that when Kusimano inhales, she inhales it willingly and is happy to become a joint because she has been convinced and accepted that that is a better way of living compared to how she used to. Now, we don't know her full story, but once she inhales the steamy substance, then she has these fits and she turns into the joint. And this intro just reminds us that the joint do have a way of changing the non-infective as long as they have the consent of the person being turned. And that consent is to allow the joint to physically collect stem cells and tailor that substance for that person so that they can turn. And in the case of Kusimayu, she turns successfully, and then once all done, all of the joint just leave the village behind. They leave that manufactured world, almost like actors finishing a play and just leaving the set. It's always been frightening seeing how choreographed and in like one hive mind all these guys are. And it's also just a reminder too of the danger that Carol is in. But there's also this is all like a warm up for what is to come in the rest of the episode. With that, we return to Albuquerque and we see Manus's arrival in his ambulance. He stops in front of Carol's house, and by now we know both these characters well enough to care about the outcome of this encounter, which makes the events of their scenes together even more filled with tension. We know Manuso's purpose is pretty straightforward. He wants to revert the joining and save the world. Carol's purpose, though, has changed in the last few days, in the last few episodes. It is no longer aligned with Manuso's. It is actually against it. She no longer cares for the world. She only cares for her own comfort, her own peace of mind, and her own happiness. And what follows is a sort of get-to-know-you actions between these two, considering these objectives that are opposite. And as expected, they are different people altogether, so they can't agree on much in the beginning. Actually, their first interactions don't go so well. They slowly descend into a little bit of friction. Manusos obviously is paranoid and suspicious of everything, and considering his lack of knowledge of the joint, he will be suspicious and paranoid. They try to use a phone to translate between the two, but then Manusos thinks that the phone is bugged and he throws it in the gutter. So we get a lot of these funny moments, and both funny but also tense at the same time, because you don't want this to escalate into a dangerous situation. There's a good dialogue between the two of them in the middle of the field under an umbrella. And this is the first time we get to see the discrepancy of knowledge between the two of them. But you also get to see a bit into their character. Manusos, knowing little of the joint, thinks that these aliens have stolen people's souls, and if the two of them can't fix them, then they are better off dead. Now, this is obviously against everything Karen believes in and against her newfound happy way of living. Now, I like the fact that Manusos here, his purpose is much more clearer, and he's clearer thinking and straightforward point of view of the situation. You know, things are not the same as before. These people are no longer human, and he needs to fix it, whatever that problem is, big or small. This is not a sign of lack of intelligence. It's actually a strong will, and he's determined to fix the problem. So it's actually a trait of character more than a flaw. But between Carol and Manusos is actually one big question, and they actually ask this question between themselves. You know, are the joints still human or not? And then obviously both of them have conflicting views based on the information at hand. But for us as audience, this question is much more harder to answer because of what we know and what Manusos doesn't know. And actually Manusos poses a really interesting question to Carol. So when Carol tells him that the joint can't even hurt an ant, Manusos responds, "Isn't it evil to value a man the same as an ant?" And these are those philosophical questions that really make this series so good. You know, as an audience, we have been asking similar questions since the beginning. To be honest, questions like, what is true happiness? Are we a destructive species, or are we worthy of this planet? But once we hear and actually a character ask such a question out loud, it just like Manusos does, it just sounds louder and all makes it more impactful. There are questions that Carol leave unanswered because that is the question of the actual series, so that she will not answer the question for us. Anyway, back to the episode. The two of them eventually agree to disagree, essentially, and Manusos starts to understand that Carol's opinion towards the joint has changed. But at the same time, he needs to understand why this has happened, and he needs to catch up on the information that he is lacking compared to Carol. So by now we've moved inside Carol's house. Manusos understands that there is a gap in knowledge between the two of them, so he continues to ask questions from Carol about the other non-infected. All the while he's looking around the house for spying devices. Carol now, interestingly and funnily, she reverts back to her angry self, which is funny considering that she's much more nicer with the joint, but not at all with another human being. She's not trying at all to make friends with Manusos so far. But Manusos does find the device inside the booze cabinet, and this is interesting because I didn't pick up on the massive importance of this in the beginning. He finds a tiny little device that records whenever the drinking cabinet inside Carol's house the door is being opened, essentially recording if somebody goes to the cabinet a lot. So Carol obviously panics, thinking that there is a spying device inside their house. She calls Zosha, and Zosha reminds her that it's been placed there by Helen when the two of them were trying to have children, and she froze her eggs. This obviously reveals the fact that, first of all, Zosha knows that there are frozen eggs from Carol out there in the wild, but also makes Manuzos curious how Carol has been talking so casually with the joined, which is essentially, for him, is the enemy. With this newfound knowledge, Manuzos decides to use the joined to get up to speed much quicker about how they operate. So he calls Zosha to his house, which is next door to Carol's, and starts asking her all the questions needed, all of them, to understand where Carol's mind is at. Now, this is all nicely moving the story forward, all in line with where the characters are at and what their priorities are. Over the next few scenes, what Manuzos does continues to drive the story forward and essentially slowly prepares season 2. So he uses the joined. He knows that they can't lie, and they have to answer all the questions now. So he asks away all the questions that he needs the answer to, and he knows that they are true because they can't lie. So when Carol finds out that Zosha has been at Manuzos' house for hours answering questions, she's furious and obviously becomes emotional. She clearly cares for Zosha. We have seen that. But at the same time, Zosha is built to please all of the non-infected, not just Carol. So she has to answer all the questions that Manuzos asked. And the brilliant writing here jumps between driving the story and developing the characters. When Carol and Zosha have their first argument by themselves about what Zosha has been telling Manuzos, Zosha reminds her that it's in her nature to tell her, but at the same time, Zosha says that she loves Manuzos the same as she loves Carol. And that just sounds heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking for Carol, and further fuels her internal conflict. She is clearly in love with someone, and that person cannot return the same amount of love. Their conversation, it's almost like human versus alien conversation, literally, because Carol projects a different type of love that Zosha projects back to her. Carol's love is true, is heartfelt, is intimate. Zosha is a love of respect, and almost like a patronizing type of love, because all she wants is to give her the best happiness that is possible, while expecting the next level of happiness to be given to her once she's infected. This conversation could have gone in a nice place, but is interrupted by flipping the episode into advancing the story again. So when Zosha has a seizure, their conversation is interrupted because Manuzos is with another joined in his house doing experiments, trying to revert the joining or find out more, and that has caused a worldwide seizure of the joint. So at the same time, that one radio frequency that was not just starting in the beginning in the earlier episodes, probably in episode 2 when we first meet Manuzos, that seems to have some sort of a different sound when it's near the joint. And I'm pretty convinced that this new clue will come in handy in season 2. On the other hand, Carol understandably cares for the joint and for their well-being, and because she can't really stop Manuzos experimenting on the joint, she uses her police shotgun to force him to stop, essentially, and fires inside the house a bullet at the wall, making him stop. But the damage is done. After all the abuse, the joint react as we know they will react, and they leave Manuzos and Carol to get some space, just the way they did earlier in the series with Carol. Now, this time, Carol decides to go with them. Even when Manuzos tells her that he thinks there is a way to put things back the way they were, Carol has heard that before. She's been there before. She's been down that path, and she knows where it leads to sadness, to loneliness, and lack of any human connection. So she leaves Manuzos behind and sets off into the sunset or sunrise, because this all happens at night, in her Ace Baby Rolls Royce, just on her way to meet her Rabban in the form of Zosha, obviously. Over the next few scenes, we see Carol and Zosha spending the most beautiful manufactured time together in these amazing locations around the world. And it all ends in a lobby of this beautiful scenic mountain chalet, and they sit on a sofa in front of a roaring fireplace. Now, it's obvious that over these scenes that Carol has been treated like a queen. You know, she's smiling, she's dressed in brighter colors. Her face is literally brighter, lighter. You can see that she's happy. But you can also see that something is scratching under the surface, something that Carol, and obviously the actress, showed this very well. You know, everything around her is a make-believe world. It's geared to make her happy. But I think what's bothering her even more is the fact that Zosha told her earlier on that she loves Manusas as much as she loves her. Surely, for Carol and any other normal human, to be honest, that would not sit well and will obviously need to be discussed. And that is what happens next. In that scenic, beautiful environment, Carol tries to find out more about Zosha, more get-to-know interactions since before the joining, how she was before the joining. She tries to understand if Zosha had other boyfriends or girlfriends, and those are some hard questions to ask, but it's good of her that she is putting forward the hard questions, asking things that maybe she doesn't want to find the answer to. But the more she digs, the more questions she asks, she always reaches the same conclusion. All this happiness, this is a new way of living that is temporary and is not real. It's all put together by the joined just to keep her happy until they find a way to turn her. And when the question arises again, as in the question about if they can turn her, the revelation and the big revelation of the episode drops. Zosha tells Carol that they actually have her stem cells already from back when she froze them with Helen. This was hinted earlier in the episode when Manus found the device inside the drinks cabinet. I really didn't pick up on it, but it just dropped like a bomb to me at least. And Carol, this is a full betrayal. This is the final drop, final nail in the coffin of their relationship. You know, so far Carol seems to have found just enough happiness to just continue with her life in this new world. But Zosha makes the mistake and tells her that there is an even, or just reminds her that there is an even better way of being happy, and that is obviously by joining them. And that just brings Carol to her normal way of asking the questions again. You know, if they found a way to turn her without her consent, and this time obviously the answer is yes, that they have her eggs and they can make those into stem cells that they need to make that tailored solution that can turn Carol into a joint, just like they did at the start of the episode with Kusimayu. More than anything else, for Carol, that is a betrayal. Zosha's endgame is not to have a happy life with Carol, it's just to keep her in the dark until they find a way to turn her. Zosha doesn't care for what Carol wants. She was built like that. And even if this blind, half-baked, manufactured happiness makes Carol happy, she doesn't care enough to allow Carol to choose between the ultimate state of happiness and her half happiness. She doesn't allow her to choose. They are not really equal in this relationship. They have different objectives. For Zosha, Carol is just another body that needs turning. It is a heartbreaking scene for Carol. And she just, you know, it's played very well. And as much as Zosha reverts to trying to convince her of the amazing happiness of the joint, blah, 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 all of that stuff that we heard plenty of times before, Carol face just tells everything. This revelation is an ice-cold shower for her, a stark reminder of the reality she is in. It's also a ticking clock. Zosha tells her that it's up to 3 months until they will be able to turn her willingly or unwillingly. At the end of this dialogue between the two of them, Zosha can see that she's lost the argument with Carol, and she tells her that she loves her. But this declaration of her just is not worth a camera angle on Zosha's face. Is literally, we see the camera from behind Zosha as she tells her that I love you to her face, to Carol. And we just continue to see Carol's face and her reaction, or her transformation back to her angry self that we met at the very start of the series. And then the last scene of the episode happens 4 days later. We find Manousos studying how electricity travels, and then Carol makes this epic return. She descends almost like a savior from a helicopter flown by Zosha, and she just lands in front of the house with a big massive container hanging under the helicopter. Once they land, she gives Zosha almost like a goodbye look. And for a brief moment there, we see that Carol has not completely gotten over Zosha, but this time she controls her emotions and steps out of the helicopter. But I'm pretty sure her feelings for Zosha will return in season 2, especially if whatever they plan to do, Carol and Manousos, to save the world doesn't work out. And as soon as she's in a tough place again, I fear Carol will return to the comfort that she had with in Zosha's company. Anyway, she gets out of the helicopter, tells Manousos that he won and they need to save the world, and clarifies what's in the container. And in the container is an atom bomb, because she requested that, and the joint obviously delivered. And that is the end of season 1. This series is top tier television. The writing, the acting, the themes, they're all aligned perfectly. 9 hours of top quality TV that makes you laugh, makes you cry, and constantly asks, interesting questions, challenging questions. At the same time, I think it sets up season 2 nicely. It leaves the door wide open for anything to happen. It can even have a totally change of tone. It can turn into a mystery altogether. But I'm pretty sure this nicely paced and balanced mix between an episode that is story driven and an episode that is character development will continue. And I can't wait to see where this goes, to be honest. But what are your thoughts? What do you think Carol and Manousos will do next? What is their plan? Where do they start? Let me know in the comments and I'll join you in the discussion. Until then, thank you for watching and we'll see you next time.